Okay, so today's masterclass is called From Self-Doubt to Stand Out. And this is a CV confidence masterclass. So I'm going to be covering as much as I possibly can today. We are going to be looking at around an hour for this masterclass. Okay, so some of you might know me a little bit. My name is Hayley, and instead of sharing a lot about my background, I wanted to actually explain more about what qualifies me to conduct this masterclass today. So, first of all, I am a certified career and life coach, and I became certified a few years ago. So I've actually been coaching now for around 4 years, offering one-on-one sessions with people from different backgrounds in different places with different questions, challenges, supporting them in various different ways. And I also own a successful recruitment company called Wild Dreams. Additionally, we offer what we call work ready programs to various training facilities, schools, non-profits. And I've actually conducted similar workshops to this to around 600 people before. And over my last 26 years of being in employment, all of those 26 years have been within the hospitality industry. I have, of course, seen millions and millions of CVs, as you can imagine. So I have seen great ones, I have seen average ones, I have seen really awful ones. So today I'm going to be sharing a lot about my personal experience to really empower all of you just to understand everything you possibly need to know when you are crafting your own CV. Also, just before we formally get started, it's great to see people's faces on cameras if you want to. So if you want to have your cameras on, then you absolutely can. If I could just ask that everyone keeps themselves muted. And it is advisable to have a pen and notebook ready for this masterclass. So if you want to grab that now, please do. I do have Dom who is assisting me today. So she'll be dropping some things in the chat. And if you're struggling with something like you can't hear or you can't see, then you're welcome to pop something in the chat. And like I mentioned, we're aiming to wrap this workshop up in roughly 1 hour. And because of that, because more than an hour, I just tend to find people's attention spans, everyone zones out a little bit. So we're going to keep it as that, which does mean that I'm not going to have time for personal questions today. However, I have added a ton of FAQs at the end of this masterclass. So basically, all of the typical questions that myself and my recruitment team have been asked over the years, I have included and I have answered them. So hopefully, if you do have a question, that is going to be covered here anyway. And my aim for you today is for you to be walking away with both the knowledge and also the confidence in crafting a standout CV to ensure that you actually get invited for that interview. And this is such an important topic because let's be real, let's be honest, it can be a really tough job market out there. And it is also very competitive. So you need to find a way to stand out. But I do want you to note the fact that I have made this word can, I've highlighted it, I've bolded it here because you can also drastically increase your chances of getting noticed. And the first way you are going to do this is by making your CV gets more than just a quick glance, or maybe even worse than that, someone rolls their eyes or sighs because they just feel like the CV is not well put together or thought out. And of course, yes, there are many, many bad and ugly CVs out there. But the reality is that you can't just be better than bad. You can't just be average because it is so competitive. So you really need to have a CV that is going to go to the top of the yes pile. You don't even want to go into that maybe pile. And of course, you definitely never want to go into the no pile either. So by the end of this masterclass, you are going to understand exactly how to get into that yes pile. And ultimately, there is tons and tons of free advice online readily available to you. If you pop into Google or into AI, help me with a CV or create a CV or CV tips, then you are going to get bombarded by various different websites. And although this might sound helpful and great that you have easy, free access to all of this information, it is not always helpful. And this can be contradicting because you're getting some information from somewhere and different information from another place. It can also be really confusing. It can be overwhelming just based on the fact that there are so many different people with opinions about this. But the reality is that it can also be incorrect. And anyone can put anything online, of course, as you all know. They don't have to be an expert in their field to be having an opinion. And it can be very easy to follow the wrong advice. So I would love for you to share in the chat now if you have found the process. I'm sure some of you are at the stage where you're looking for a job or you have been. Maybe you're joining this masterclass because you're just wanting to get information for the future. But if you have been looking into CV information, let me know in the chat, like, how are you finding it? Have you found it maybe helpful, maybe confusing, challenging, any of the things? I would just love to hear from you. I would say for me, I probably just find it quite overwhelming if I were to research this. So this is another one to prompt you to pop a guess into the chat now. I would love for you to guess how long you think that it takes an employer or a recruiter to read your CV. Okay, we've got some answers already coming in. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 2, 5. Okay, so a lot of you have said around the 5 minute kind of mark, which is a very good guess. And the answer is 6 seconds, which is obviously going to be shocking for some of you. And this is, of course, on average what they say. But if you consider it, if you look at a recruiter's perspective who is perhaps getting hundreds and hundreds of CVs in every single day, they're just going to look at a CV, they're going to quickly scan, read it, and they're going to decide whether it's someone that is worth talking to or not. And the same with an employer. They're going to just take a quick look, and if it doesn't catch their eye immediately, then you're going straight into that no pile. So you really do not have long to impress someone. And that's why these tips today are so valuable and important. So let's start by just what is a CV? So a CV, it stands for curriculum vitae, which is a Latin word, and it is sometimes referred to as a resume, and there's nothing wrong with using that term as well. But typically, if you were to get the definition, a resume refers to like a slightly shorter, more compressed version of your CV. But it's also a term that is used more commonly in other countries, like the US will always just say resume. And the meaning of curriculum vitae, it's the path of your life, which makes a ton of sense to me because ultimately what you're doing with a CV is that you are walking employers through the path of your career and of your education. But ultimately, all it is a document that is highlighting your professional experience and achievements and why you are the ideal candidate for the position that you are applying for. So just some do's, and then we're going to do some don'ts. These are very basic and simple, but the reality is these are the sorts of things that myself and my company see time and time again of people doing incorrectly when they're creating their CVs. So keep it clean and simple. The term less is more really is correct when it comes to your CV. So what I'm talking here is a white background with black wording. Keep it simple, not different colors and different fonts. The only like time I would say it's good to have a very graphically pretty CV is if you are literally applying to a job where that is necessary. Like if you are applying as a graphic designer, for example, of course you want to maybe showcase your skills, and that's going to be a little bit more expected from the employer. But for the most part, you can't go wrong if you just keep it simple. Always use an easy to read font, making sure that it's a standard size, and make sure that your headings are slightly bigger font and or bolded so that they do stand out. Always double check your CV for spelling, grammar, just attention to detail type of things. I will never forget a CV once that I saw, and the person had done bullet points on their like duties for their work experience, which is totally the right thing to do. Um, or in fact, no, it wasn't. It was their skills. And one of the bullet points, it said attention to detail. And then directly under that was a bullet point with no information. So they'd like forgotten to either type something or they'd forgotten to remove that bullet point. And I was just like, that's very ironic because clearly you don't actually have that good of attention to detail. And the reality is, even if you are applying for a position where you're not going to be expected to need to have good grammar or spelling skills, let's say you're applying for a position to work in a garden, very unlikely you're going to be needing to spell well, but it still is not seen as acceptable if you are not doing these basic things on your CV. You also need to make sure that your CV is up to date and all correct. Often we'll see people will have their CV and they'll have their current place of work, which it says currently employed, which is fine. But then directly under that, then their job before that one, it also says that they're currently employed there. So things like that, you just have forgotten to actually put the end date of your previous place of employment, which it can easily happen, but that's why it's really important just to double check things. Always be truthful on your CV. You shouldn't be making anything up. It will always come out, whether it comes out as part of the application process, if you've been untruthful, or whether it comes out in the interview, or to be perfectly honest, it could even come out at a later stage. Even if you did get hired, if you've been dishonest, that is going to bite you in the butt eventually. And no one wants to be in an environment where they are working in a situation where they haven't been truthful. Like I mentioned, bullet points now, that's still a great idea. Keep it tidy, keep it neat. It's just easier for people to read instead of like lots and lots of text on a screen. And always put your CV into PDF format. Word format is okay as well, but typically PDF is standard because it's just seen as more professional. And some, on occasion, we will receive CVs in other formats such as Excel, which is never going to work. It's really, really hard to read it. It also doesn't format very well with databases. So now the don'ts, the things you shouldn't do. Don't use any fancy borders around your CV, clip art images, or any other images other than your photo. And I'm going to be talking about your photo in a minute. But for example, you don't need multiple pictures of yourself. If you are supplying a portfolio with your CV, which is the case with some positions, like chefs, for example, might have a food portfolio, or a photographer might have a photographic portfolio. That's all great, but then just keep that separate to your CV. Your CV should just only have your photo of yourself. Like I already mentioned, no bright colors, just keep it black text, no background colors, shapes, shades, none of that. No highlighted words, no charts, no graphs, no tables. Sometimes we'll see on CVs, people will list their skills, for example, but instead of just listing them, they'll also have next to it like a little graph of like how skilled they are in that particular skill. All of this is completely meaningless. It doesn't provide the person reading the CV with any real actual facts about you or your abilities. It's also not necessary to state that at the bottom of the CV that this is true, or to sign a CV. Like I mentioned, yes, you have to be truthful, but anyone that is receiving your CV will just assume automatically that you have been truthful. Make sure that you are not including irrelevant information. And it is important to include, for example, everywhere that you have worked, but you don't need to go into a lot of detail about something that isn't necessarily relevant to the position that you are applying for. So I will give you an example. If you are perhaps applying for a position as a marketing manager at a company and you obviously have had some marketing experience, maybe you were a social media manager in your previous place of employment, but now 10 years ago you were a waitress at Spur, which is great. We've all been there. Typical way we get a foot in the door. So what I'm saying is you would still include the fact that you worked for Spur and that you were a waitress, but you don't need to put tons and tons of information about what you did there because it really is not relevant to the position that you are applying for today. And you also don't want to be repetitive. And one typical way that people end up being repetitive in their CV is that they might have a summary about themselves, which we'll also talk about in a second. They may also list skills, and then they may list their basic duties that they were doing in their places of employment. But all of these things end up being repetitive. Or let's be honest, often when you change your career or your job, you might be doing something that is very similar. So I'll use that example of a marketing manager again. Previously, the person worked as a social media manager. Before that, they worked as a marketing assistant. So the things that they were doing in those roles were very similar. So you don't need to be putting the same exact duties for every single job that you have done. So it will be much better if you can think about different types of duties that you had, because then you're not being repetitive, but you're also highlighting a range of skills that you have had during your career. Another thing is that you don't typically need to go into a lot of detail about what you were doing in your career more than 10 years ago. So, a little bit like what I just mentioned, and some of you here may not have 10 years of work experience, some of you may have substantially more than that. But for the most part, the general rule of thumb is put more information within up to the last 10 years. Past that, you can keep it much more simple. You can still include the information, but you don't need to go into as much detail. So next, I want to talk about your structure of your CV and the headings that will be in your CV. And Dom is actually also going to put our CV template in the chat for you now. So I would recommend downloading that because you'll be able to make use of it when you're creating a CV. And it's very basic, but it's really talking about what I have on the screen here. So at the very top of the CV, you're going to have your name. Underneath that, you're going to have your photo and then your motivational paragraph, which is also known as your summary or your about section, sometimes called a profile. And like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about that in more detail shortly because that is very, very important to include on your CV. And then you're going to have your personal information. So obviously, if you are South African, for example, you are going to be putting your ID number there. Putting your ID number there is a good idea just because people will sometimes use that as a reference when you are uploading your CV to a database. But also, it is giving the person your age, which some people may say they don't necessarily want to share their age, especially if you are slightly older, if you're coming up to like a retirement sort of age. But the reality is, it's better if you have that information there because then that person knows, the person reading your CV has the facts, they know how old you are, and if they decide not to move forward with you based on your age, rather have that situation when you first send your CV as opposed to them giving you a phone call and then finding out and you're sort of just wasting your time. You also should put the area that you reside in. You do not need to put your full address. You don't have to put your postal address, but you can just put the region as well as the province. Then if you do have dependents and a spouse, you can also include that. This is not essential to include, but it is a good idea to include in certain industries, especially the hospitality industry. And the reason for that is because a lot of the positions are live-in. So it's just important for an employer to know that. But it's a type of thing that you may just get asked at your interview if you don't already have it in your CV. You should also be including, if you have a driver's license, the languages you speak. Obviously, in South Africa, most people speak a variety of languages, which is really great. So it's good to put that and highlight that fact. and then your contact details because they need to be able to reach you. And you can also put your LinkedIn URL as well into this section. For those of you who aren't perhaps on LinkedIn, I would really recommend that you make use of it. I don't want to go into detail about LinkedIn right now because that can be a masterclass for another day. And if there's interest, I will definitely do that. Maybe pop in the chat now if you're interested in that, just so I know. But yeah, if you do have your LinkedIn profile, then you can add that within your personal information section. Then underneath this, it would be your education. So with your education, you would have your school. So for example, your matric, which is a common one that you may have, and you could just put the name of the school and then the year that you matriculated, but you do not need to list all of your subjects here. It's really not necessary. An employer is not particularly interested in what you did at school. They just want to know whether you matriculated. And then underneath this, you would have an opportunity to have higher education. Now, not everybody is going to have higher education. So if you don't, you simply just would not include this in your CV. But this is just any tertiary education. Maybe you went to university, any courses, trainings you've done, that sort of thing. And there you can just list the name of them, the year that it was completed. And again, if you feel that it's relevant, then you can add more information there. It's also good to have your computer literacy on your CV if it is important for the position that you are applying to. There's many positions that are very admin heavy and they want to know what your level of literacy is, what computer programs you have worked on previously. So if you're just including this information in your CV, then it is going to act as motivation for you in potentially getting that interview. Again, it's not essential, especially if you're doing a job which has got nothing to do with computers. And then you can also have achievements as well. I am going to share another way of including this in your CV later on. It's really up to you how you do this, but it is really nice to highlight any achievements that you have, especially in a way where you are sharing stats and proven information. And ideally, these achievements you're hoping are going to link back to the position that you are actually applying for. Next is going to be your work experience section, which of course is very important because everyone wants to know what you have been doing previously. Something that we do see people do wrong quite often is they will list their first ever job at the very, very top instead of their current place of employment or their most recent place of employment in the case whereby you may not be currently working. So like I mentioned before, imagine you've now worked for 10, 20, 30 plus years and you're sharing what you did back in 1990. An employer, yes, it can be there right at the bottom, but it really should be right at the bottom. It shouldn't be the first thing that an employer reads. So instead, you're going to have your current place of employment listed first, and then you are going to go down in that exact order. And then contactable references are, as well is important on your CV, especially in South Africa. And here you should be listing the name of the person, their position, the company that they work for, as well as their contact information. Just a note on contactable references is that it's very important that you ask the person before you put their details on your CV. And there's many reasons for that, but one of them is just simply based on the Poppy Act. Legally, you're not allowed to give out anyone's contact details without their permission. But also, it just gives them a heads up and, they're just going to know that they may perhaps get a phone call or an email to ask how you performed in your position. So it's good just to touch base with them on that. So make use, like I say, of the template that's been shared in the chat. So definitely download that to your device. If you can't at the moment, it's okay because we do have it on our website as well. Okay, so I've mentioned this a couple of times and I said that we would get to it. And that is your summary on your CV. And to me, if you take away nothing else from this entire masterclass, if you've zoned out completely already, this is really the most important part. And it really is, it's critical. If you think about it on your CV, right at the top, because remember the order of your CV, it's your name, it's your photo, and then it's your summary, and then all of the other stuff. So this is seen as like what I call prime real estate at the top because it's the first thing that employers or recruiters are going to see. And remember, you only have 6 seconds to impress them. So that's basically that could be the first thing and the only thing they read. They may read through it, they may think, oh, no, move on. Or they may read through it and think, oh, okay, that was interesting. And then they're going to continue reading the rest of the information. So this does need to be short and sweet, but it still has to be impactful. And it needs to highlight your relevant skills and experience without being repetitive. So, what I mean is, when I say repetitive, I'm not talking about you repeating the same sentence within the summary. I'm talking about you don't need to say that, like, I worked for 2 years at this property, then I worked for 8 years at this property, because that information is already in your CV, in your work experience section. So there's no need to repeat the information that they can already read. And to be quite frank, that information is actually very boring. And remember, you're trying to get their attention. So it needs to be uniquely you. It should not be generic. It's very hard to write a summary about yourself that isn't generic. The amount of CVs I have personally read where it says on there that I'm a team player, those words, I would say like 98% of CVs all say that. And while maybe you are a team player and while maybe the job does require you to be a team player, I mean, at the end of the day, most jobs do, it is just a bit boring and it is a bit generic. So if you can find ways to communicate that in other ways, then that is the sort of thing that will make you stand out. And ideally, it should include some relevant keywords that are relevant to the role that you're applying for. Now, I do understand that you may be sending your CV out and you might not have seen a job description. You may just be trying your luck. You might just be sending your CV through to a company directly. So you're not always necessarily going to know. But just doing a little bit of research on the way they do things, the sorts of employers they're looking for, will really help you if you can include something that is going to be tailored to them. And of course, it needs to show enthusiasm for what you do because it's really important. Employers are wanting to hire people that want to be there, that want to work, that are not just doing it as a transaction where it's like a case of showing up, working your 8 hours, whatever it is, and then getting your paycheck. Even though that might be your mindset around your job, you don't want them to know that. So I'm actually going to take it a step further with this because I said it's so important and I want to share with you some examples of CV summaries. So I'm going to be sharing a bad example, an average example, and a great example. And I want you to remember that I said at the beginning, you don't want to be average. You have to be better than average. So I've done this as the same person for each one so that you can compare. So I'll read this out to you. I have 4 years of experience in an office environment. During this time, I've learned a range of skills such as scheduling appointments, answering phones and emails professionally, stock takes, ordering, invoices, petty cash management. I am a team player and a hard worker. I love nature and I would like my next role to be in a safari lodge environment. I believe I will prove myself to any employer. Thank you for your consideration. Okay, so a few of the things that have been done wrong here is this person has repeated exactly what she has done in her work experience. That's already there in her work experience section. She's putting her duties, etc. She's also put the exact number of years, that she's worked. Again, they can find that information out easily by looking at the work experience section. She's used those generic terms, like I pointed out, that everybody is using in their CV. And there's also a spelling mistake as well. I'm not sure if anyone caught that, but she has spelt role wrong. So you might read this and you might think, well, I actually think that's a really good summary, right? And there's nothing wrong if you think that, because at the end of the day, like I said, I've been doing this a long time. I'm an expert in this. So for me, it just isn't great. But the point of this masterclass is for you to really stand out. So I don't want you to come away from this being like, oh yeah, I can more or less put a CV together. I grasp the concept. I really want you to understand how to put together an amazing CV. Okay, so let's talk now about an average example. So again, remember this is the same person. Over the years, I have worked in an administration role. I have established a diverse range of skills, both back and front of house. I consider attention to detail in everything that I do, whether it is balancing the financial records, placing an order, or speaking with a customer. I'm confident that I can bring this experience and passion into a guest relations role, as I would love the opportunity to create memorable experiences for guests. I'm an avid nature lover, and I know that I would thrive in a wilderness environment. While I know this brings its own operational challenges, I'm ready to take this on with enthusiasm and welcome the growth that this will bring. I've just read this out now and I think it's actually pretty good. I'm wondering how good my great one is going to be. But anyway, yeah, so this is to me is okay. It's fine. It would get my attention. But would I be incredibly excited about this person? Maybe. Would they go into the maybe or the yes pile? Who knows? It depends on the other candidates. It depends on how competitive it is. It depends on if someone else has done a better job ultimately. So now let's go to the excellent example. With a few years of experience in administration, I've developed a well-rounded skill set that spans both front and back of house operations. I pride myself on meticulous attention to detail, whether I'm managing financial records, coordinating supply orders, or engaging with customers. My background has equipped me with strong organization and communication abilities, and I'm passionate about delivering exceptional service. I'm excited to transition into a guest-facing role where I can create memorable, meaningful experiences for lodge visitors. As an avid nature enthusiastic, I'm drawn to the unique setting of a wilderness-based lodge. I understand the operational demands this environment can bring, and I'm eager to embrace them with enthusiasm, adaptability, and a growth mindset. Okay, so it's similar to the last one, but it's shared. So what she's sort of done here, so this person in particular, what I base this on is the idea being that this person has come from an admin background and is wanting to transition into hospitality, but especially within the lodge industry. And transitioning a career can be difficult. So she has explained to the employer where her transferable skills are. So she knows she needs to be organized in this role. She knows she needs to have good communication skills. She knows that it is about service. So she's included all of this information. And she's also turned it around and she's talking about wanting to create memorable, meaningful experiences for lodge visitors. So she's not just thinking about herself in this, she's actually thinking about the guests. So what would make this even better would be if she was tailoring it exactly to the position that she was applying to, as well as the lodge that she was applying to. Because then, if she was, she would be able to do a little bit of research on the lodge and she would be able to communicate exactly why she wants to work for this property. And that is important because just as much as I said, an employer is wanting you to be enthusiastic and passionate about working in general, they're also wanting you to be enthusiastic about working for them. So you need to be able to showcase this in your application where possible, when you know that you're applying to a particular property. So I hope that was helpful. Let me know in the comments, give me a thumbs up. Let me know if you're still confused, but it's definitely something that I would suggest playing around with yourself. Have a look at your current CV, maybe if you have one, and yeah, just make sure you play around with your own version of your summary. So like I was just mentioning now as well about tailoring your CV. So, oh, sorry. Why is this important? It will make you stand out against the competition. It's going to be showing the hiring manager exactly why you are ideal for the role without them second guessing or without them having any concerns. It will also show them that you are genuinely excited about working for them. Like I mentioned, that is incredibly important. How can you tailor your CV? In your summary, adding your motivational, relevant information, why you have applied to work for them, what it is about them that you're really excited about. In your achievements, you can include relevant achievements for the position that you are applying for. And in your duty section underneath your work experience. So again, think about, okay, what does this role need? What is the job description? What are the requirements in this position? How can I demonstrate and prove to them that I have these skills or I have this experience? And this is also where if you are transferring your career as well, you're pivoting from one industry to another industry, this is extra important that you do that because you may already be somewhat on a back foot where they look at your CV and think, oh, you don't really have experience in this particular industry. But if you can communicate your skills and how they are relevant, that is really going to help your chances. So I also want to talk about cover letters because they are a little bit old-fashioned, or at least the term of a cover letter is, and you don't see them being requested that often. But this doesn't mean that you shouldn't include them or shouldn't at least include personalized information about yourself and why you are the best person for the job that you are applying for. The purpose of a cover letter is motivation. And typically, this would always be a separate letter to your CV, but you could absolutely just consider this as you're writing your summary, motivational paragraph. Also, if you are sending out your CV via email, it's really important to never just send your CV with a subject heading with no information in your actual email. Again, we're not going to talk about applications in general today, just because that's a whole other topic. But it is really important that you always include some information in your actual email. So you could use this as like your cover as well. And a cover letter, you have to tailor it for the position and the company that you are applying for. And ultimately, you are considering this as a summary of why you are awesome. So you need to consider selling yourself. As humans, sometimes we don't like to talk about how wonderful we are. We actually can get embarrassed about it, and we struggle to find the things that we feel we really excel at and that we're really good at. But this is a time where you need to put that aside and you need to really put your all into motivating and selling yourself for a position. Personally, for my company, if I'm hiring, I love a cover letter to be included. I don't necessarily include that in the requirements. So I won't say the words add a cover letter, but I will say reasons as to why you want to work for us. As a business owner, that's incredibly important to me, and that will definitely, it could definitely be the make or break whether I would consider interviewing someone or not. And some applications will require a cover letter. So sometimes, like I say, you will see it as requested. And the reason for this is because the company is wanting you to prove that you have researched them, researched the job, that you understand what exactly the position entails, what they are about. It may also be just to test that you can write really well, your spelling, your grammar, especially if that is a requirement of the position. They want to really understand why you feel that you would be the best person for the job. So if you ever see a cover letter is listed as a requirement, make sure you include it. So now we're going to move on to a completely different topic, and that is your photo on your CV. And the reality is that this is also something that people often don't get quite right. And first of all, the photo should go directly onto your CV. It shouldn't be separate as a separate attachment. You're trying to remember you've only got those 6 seconds, so you're trying to minimize the number of attachments that an employer or a hiring manager is opening. I do want to mention that it is commonplace in South Africa to include photos on CVs. Not necessarily in all industries, but it is fairly common, especially within the hospitality industry. but in other parts of the world, it is not as common and actually can be seen as discriminatory. So it really just depends. If it's the norm where you are, where you're applying for a position, I expect most of you are applying for roles within South Africa or Southern Africa. So then I would recommend that you include one. And also, while I do understand the discriminatory aspect of it, the reality is that most people have a LinkedIn profile, and LinkedIn requires a photo of the person too. So, if you're not going to put one on your CV, people can still view your LinkedIn anyway. So, a few tips, and these are going to be very basic tips, but trust me, like I say, basic is sometimes needed with photos. So take the photo with a decent camera phone where possible, in good lighting. Outside is often best. And have a plain neutral background. If there's a lot going on in the background, then it can be quite distracting. Your photo should be head and shoulders only, not your full body. No one needs to see your entire body. You should be looking smart. So dress basically like you are attending an interview. Obviously, they're only seeing the top half of you anyway, so you could totally have your pajamas on the bottom half, but you do just need to make it look like you've made a little bit of an effort, not maybe be in like a casual t-shirt or something like that. Same goes with like your hair, your makeup, making sure it's neat and tidy. The photo should also be in color. No drinks, cigarettes in the photo. And although that might sound like that is crazy, like who would put that in their CV? It happens often. And the reason for that is honestly, I think just because people don't have a photo of themselves. So then they look through like their Facebook and they find a picture of themselves. Like the only one that they have for the last 5 years was a picture of them when they were out clubbing with a beer in their hand. So I get it, I understand, but it's absolutely not acceptable. You will immediately be put into the no pile, and you will also get the eye roll as well. There also should not be other people or pets in the photos. That's another thing that people often do wrong. They include their entire family. It's great if you are married and have children, wonderful, but that is not the focus and purpose of a CV. A CV is professional. It's got nothing to do with your family life. No sunglasses and caps, because ultimately that's just going to be hiding your face. And you should be smiling naturally. It's not an ID photo, so you don't need to be looking stern into the camera. And this is the first time that a potential employer is seeing you. So you want to give them connotations that you are a warm and friendly person, someone that they would want to spend their time with. And while it might sound almost ridiculous that anyone would be able to tell that just from a photo, as we all know, as humans, we're very much about imagery. And you can, if someone does have a stern, unhappy look on their face, then it just doesn't give that person reading the CV a good feeling. And also, if possible, not to do it selfie style, not to be overly posed as well. We all have friends, family members, people that can just take a photo for us. So go to that extra effort. And there's so many people that we speak to who are looking for jobs who maybe send us a CV with a really bad photo. And we might ask them, would it be possible for you to send us another picture? And they will say, oh, no, I don't have another one. But it confuses me because why can't you just take one? It's really worth doing that. So it's not to say to delay your application, but just take the time, take a photo that you are happy with. I'm actually going to be sharing some real life examples of photos that we have received now to really explain to you all what you should not be doing. So this was one that we received. So in this one, which I didn't actually put in my CV tips, the main issue is the body language. The fact that this person has their arms crossed, folded over their chest. Obviously, they're not wearing smart clothing whatsoever, but it just comes across as like very stern, probably someone you're not going to want to mess with, probably someone you're not going to want to hire or work with. Additionally, in this picture, there's a lot of things going on in the background. Looks like guns, to be honest. But yeah, so, it's just there's so many things wrong with this photo. Here is another one. So this person is not wearing a top. So obviously not ideal to be topless in a photo, regardless of what sex you are, doesn't matter. But yeah, that's really the main issue with this image. This one, the person looks like they're in a bed, um, appears to be. So obviously not a professional setting, in any, yeah, shape or form. Unfortunately, obviously I blacked out the photos here, but I wish you could see the expression on this person's face because it was quite a classic. And this one is probably the best out of all of them, but it's very posed. I would expect that this photo was taken for a different purpose, not to do with the CV, and she just used it. So that's, okay, but it just isn't really appropriate for a CV. And the final one is obviously of myself with a glass of wine, like I mentioned. Posing with alcohol, things like that is never okay. And also, these photos I got from CVs from like at least 5, 6 years ago. And I still remember receiving these CVs. So yeah, it's funny that that's how bad the pictures were. But unfortunately, it's not a 5 years ago problem. It happens all the time. So here is a example of what a good CV photo would look like. Plain background, head and shoulders, looking straight into the camera, looking smart, and smiling. This looks like someone that I would want to employ. So it really doesn't have to be complicated. I don't want you to overthink this too much. I'd love to hear in the chat if that's helped you at all. Are you rethinking your current CV photo? Do any of you want to share? Do you have photos with pictures of alcohol, or do you have your mother in the background, or your dog, or anything like that? But yeah, hopefully this is going to change the way you do your photo if you are currently not doing it the correct way. Okay, so let's now talk about the work experience section because this is, of course, very important. So here you are going to be including the dates that you worked in that place of employment, and that would be the month to the year to the month to the year. So the starting month to the end month and year. You do not need to put the exact date. You don't need to put that it was Sunday the 16th, for example, but then it would be like June 2024 to June 2025. You need to put the company name, you need to put the job title that you held, and then you should include your main responsibilities and bullet point these. Remember, it's really important that you make this just clear, easy, quick for someone to read. And earlier I mentioned about achievements and having a separate heading for this in your CV, which is one way of doing things. But another way of doing things would be for you to actually list your main responsibilities as well as your main achievements. Maybe not main achievements, just achievements. So responsibilities, you're going to list a few there. Achievements, you're going to list a couple there. And this is all about proving you are the right person for the job, showing that you are proud of the achievements that you had. And of course, like I keep mentioning, make sure that it is relevant to the position that you are applying for. And when you are bullet pointing, it doesn't need to be lots, doesn't have to be lots of information. My recommendation would be to keep it at 5 duties maximum, because otherwise it just becomes too much to read, and then the CV also becomes too long overall. So with recommendations, this is what I mean as contactable references. We've already mentioned this, asking them permission, listing their details, but one thing that I didn't mention already was that these people do need to be superior to you in the workplace. So it needs to be supervisors, it needs to be managers, owners, or HR managers. It can't be your colleagues. And the reason for that is because a colleague is not, although a colleague could write almost a character reference and talk about how you worked, employers are solely wanting to know what your manager thought about you, like how you reported to them, how you listened to their instruction, if you took initiative, all of that sort of thing. And of course, before you hit that send button, you should just take the time to put yourself in the hiring manager's shoes. What would they think on receiving your CV? So you should double check everything. Ask yourself, do you believe you have conveyed confidence and that you stand out for this role? And you might feel like now you've created your CV and you're rushing and you're worried the deadline's going to close and you just want to get your CV in and maybe you're tired by this point. But honestly, this is a step that you shouldn't leave out. And even if it means going to make an edit, maybe you want to change something in your summary, maybe you want to add something in your work experience, maybe you suddenly thought of an achievement, make sure you do it. And you should only hit send if you feel confident that you will end up in that yes pile. If there's any doubt, if you think, no, I might make the maybe pile, just take that extra effort to see if there's anything that you can change. And I do want to mention as well that if you don't get into the yes pile, if you are in the no pile, it doesn't necessarily mean that you did something wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that your CV wasn't good. It might just mean that there was someone that was better suited for the position. It may mean that there was something completely out of your control. A lot of the time, you're not necessarily going to even know the reason why. It might be that they had an internal person apply for the position that was unexpected. It may be that they closed the role due to their budgets, or it might even be that the person who had resigned changed their mind. So there's a lot of reasons. So ultimately, what I'm wanting is for you to still feel confident about the CV that you are sending. So just to summarize the topics that we've covered today, these are my key takeaways I want you to have. You only have a few seconds to impress the person that is reading your CV. Mistakes on your CV will put you into that no pile. So it's important that you always check everything. Structure your CV correctly. Less is often more with CVs, so you need to be avoiding colors, graphs, random images that are there for no reason. Think about attention to detail in every single aspect, whether it is your photo, the font you're using, where you're bolding headings. It's important that you create a brilliant and unique standout summary about yourself. Where possible, you should be tailoring your CV to every single role that you're applying for and every single company that you're applying to. And I also just want to say, I know that sounds like a big job, but if you are able to do that, it could be the difference between you getting an interview and not getting an interview. And only click send once you are confident that you are going to be in that yes pile. So I know we're running out of time, but as mentioned, I do want to go through a few FAQs. So these are questions that we commonly just get asked as recruiters, which should really support you if perhaps you're thinking now, okay, that was great, but like, oh, what about this? So there might be some people at entry level here or who's going to be watching this. You might be thinking, well, why is it important to even have a CV if I don't have any work experience? So it is important because it's important to show a bit about who you are, what you're passionate about, the education that you have had. And at the end of the day, it's a starting point. So in time, you'll be able to build on that CV, adding more achievements, courses, qualifications, as well as the work experience that you get. And this is a document that should be kept up to date all the time, even when you're not looking for work. Maybe you think of something, add it on. Also, if you haven't been employed and you're thinking, well, what can I put under work experience? If you have had none, you can't put any yet, but I would recommend you try and get some, whether it's volunteer work, any part-time work, maybe you've done babysitting for the next door neighbor, any contract work that is still work just because it was on a contract. It's still important to put there. And it could even be that you have done school internships and things like that, or through a company that you've trained with. So you can include that sort of information as well. People will often say, how long should my CV be? And the simple answer is 1 to 3 pages. Of course, if it's your first ever CV, it is automatically only going to be 1 page long, which is totally fine. But you might be in a situation that you've got many, many years of work experience and you're actually struggling to even include it on your CV. And you should never leave out information. It does need to be truthful. You should always have every place you've worked on there, but you need to try and keep it within 3 pages. And there are certain ways that you can do that. So, like as an example, I said to you, you don't need to go into lots of details about jobs that you've done like past 10 years ago. So, for example, with the duties, you don't need to bullet point things you've done from years prior to that. Also, you're keeping your duties short, only including the really relevant things in your CV. Okay, another question that we often get is, what if you haven't worked and you don't have a reference to add on your CV? And ultimately, if you haven't worked, you don't need to provide reference letters, you don't need to provide references on your CV, but you could then look at it as more of like a character reference or someone that has trained you, for example. So it could be some like a trainer, an educator, some sort of teacher you've had, maybe even a mentor or your pastor. So there's always ways that you can look at it. And is it ideal? No. But at the end of the day, if you really are coming in at entry level, an employer cannot expect you to have this information available. Do I need to have a photo on my CV? So, no, you don't have to. But like I already mentioned, in South Africa, it is commonplace to do that at the moment. And if an application calls for it, then you should be definitely including it. Can I use Canva and can I use AI to create my CV? So, Canva, perhaps if anyone doesn't know, it is a design platform that many people use, and they do have CV templates on there, which is really helpful because you can just type directly on it. So, my answer to this is yes, you can use it, absolutely, but you still need to follow the CV tips and information that I have provided here. Because what can happen with some of the Canva templates is they can be very bright colors, like just the formatting can be a little bit off. They might have crazy fonts because it looks fun. And also remember that Canva is not always going to have the right headings for your CV because this is just a random template. People from all over the world are getting access to these templates. So you shouldn't just be automatically following along exactly as per the Canva template. You can add your own headings. You can edit it directly on there as per the ones that I've suggested today. And then with AI, so ChatGPT is obviously commonly being used for this type of thing. And in my opinion, this is really helpful if you want to check your CV for spelling or grammar errors. You could actually upload it there and you just prompt it to say, can you check this? But I wouldn't use it to create your entire CV just because it is going to be very obvious that you have used AI. And remember my tip around not wanting to be too generic. Unfortunately, AI is going to be generic and your CV is going to perhaps look like the last person's CV and the person before that, which is exactly what you don't want to do. You don't want to go into that generic box. And additionally, AI doesn't always understand you. Sometimes it does put out incorrect information. So if you are going to use it, just make sure you're still double checking it. Don't use that as your kind of end goal. You still do that process of just making sure you are 100% happy with it. AI can be really helpful for other things in your job search, but again, we don't have a ton of time to talk about this today. But for example, preparing for interviews or things like that. But for your CV, I would just use it with somewhat caution. Do I need to put my reasons for leaving on my CV? So the short answer to this is no. If you have worked for like a contract position or a freelance role, it's important to make this clear because you don't want an employer to assume that you were, I don't like this term, but a job hopper where you're just moving from job to job. So now if they see, oh, you worked there for 3 months, you worked there for 1 month, and it was a contract position, they are not going to know that unless you clearly state that. So therefore, you could write their reason for leaving. This was a 3-month contract. Maybe you were covering someone's maternity leave, or maybe the company had a big project that you were assisting them with. So there are some reasons where it's going to be beneficial for you to include that information. But additionally, if you feel like you need to explain it, because maybe it wasn't a contract position, maybe you left a job and you weren't there long, perhaps you left within the probation period, for example, which it might give an employer a little bit of a red flag. They might think, oh, I wonder why that happened. And I still feel like the majority of employers will still hear you out and will still invite you for an interview if they feel that your application overall is what they're looking for. But it still might be worth just explaining, why you maybe left. Let's say you relocated to a different region or whatever the case is. But you should always put your reasons of leaving in a professional way, because if you left because you hated your boss, then of course you can't put that on your CV. And you also can't say that in your interview either. So again, like I say, we could cover a lot of topics today, all of that sort of thing too, but it's just important to use, just think about it before you type exactly why you left. And if you're not sure, rather just don't include that information at all. Also, what if you took a career break? Should you include this on your CV, or how should you communicate this? And all you need to do is state that you took a career break, and you can add the reason in there. So let's say you didn't work for a year, 2 years plus, etc. Maybe it was because you had a child, you were studying, you went on a gap year for travel. That's all totally fine. And any employer who is not going to consider you just because you didn't work for a period of time, in my opinion, is probably not going to be a great employer. Anyone who's going to judge you without actually having that conversation with you. And I feel like, as bad as the pandemic was, that also probably gave some employers the understanding that there are going to be times where people weren't necessarily working, and that it does just happen. And it's totally up to you about how much you want to share about this. Your CV is not for you to share a lot about your personal life. And often it doesn't come across necessarily well when you do. Sometimes it can just honestly be a bit too much information. Really, the interview would be a time where you might elaborate on more details, but again, you should only share as much as you personally feel comfortable with. So let's say, for example, you took a career gap because you were off sick. You do not need to disclose exactly this to your employer. It's not their right to know your medical condition. You might want to say that you just took a break because you did have a medical condition, but you don't have to tell them, for example, what that condition was. Another question is, what if I didn't get on with my employer or I was dismissed? Can I totally leave this job off of my CV? So no, you can't, because remember, your CV does need to be truthful, and this is the sort of thing that will probably get found out. So you need to include it, but you wouldn't be listing them as a reference, because you are the one that gets to choose who you list as a reference. And unfortunately, reality is there might be some recruiters that are not doing things ethically, for example, but for the most part, a recruiter is only ever going to contact the references listed on your CV. They're never going to be contacting a company that you haven't got listed on your CV. They shouldn't have the right to do that. And if you're applying directly to an employer, they shouldn't be doing that either. But of course, there's always a chance they know your previous boss. You never know. And they just have a conversation. But yeah, so you include it, but you do not include them as a reference. So we've already shared our free CV template with you. So just a reminder to download that if you haven't already, but you can also go to our website to access that. We have a whole CV advice page. There is a ton of helpful information on our website. So definitely spend some time looking through that this week. And you really have only scratched the surface today with this masterclass, but it's still a really important step in your job search, because ultimately, if you don't get your CV right, you are not even going to be able to get to that interview stage. And this leads me to talk about my new online course that I've recently launched. This is called Career Confidence, Your Guide to Getting Hired. And this is for someone, if you're in a situation and You maybe have just started your job search and you don't even know where to begin, or maybe you've been in it for a really long time and you just feel like you're not getting anywhere. This is for you if you want to go from confused to confident and you just want to have ease and understanding. um, and this is so much more than just CVs. This is long past the end game of even getting hired in your dream job. So the course covers absolutely everything from where to find jobs to how to find them. And it's very strategy heavy, but it's explained in a really easy way. So, in a very similar way as to the format of this masterclass today. And at the end of this course, you will have all of the tools and confidence that you need in order to get hired in your dream job. And just a few logistics to explain this course. It is online, it is video based, so it's me talking on camera. It's jam packed, it's 8 modules. So I've already explained a little bit about it, but yes, we'll go into more detail about CVs, but we'll also talk about the application as a whole. So you're thinking about certificates and supporting documents. What else do you need to include? We also go into detail about interviews, from body language to what to wear to the STAR interview method. I talk about networking and about LinkedIn as well and creating a great profile. So it really is full. It's 23 lessons in total, and it includes tasks, which are really good to do. This is a way to hold you accountable in what you're doing and so that you're actually taking in the information, and also lots of downloadable resources as well, including templates and even ebooks. And what's also nice about it is that you can do this in your own time. So there's no time limit on it. You can do it in between, you can do it while you're working, you can do it in the evenings, and you can take as long as you want. You could like do it all within a couple of weeks, or you might take a few months to do it. In the chat, we've also Dom shared our free CV ebook, CV tips. So if you click on that link, you will be able to access it on the online platform. All you have to do is just pop your email in, and that will really help support you. It basically is like a written summary of everything that I have shared today. And if you are really ready to take control of your career destiny and do this with confidence, then doing the course is the transformative step that will really support you in this. And I am going to be offering this as a July offer for anyone that purchases the course this month. We will throw in a one-on-one with me as well. And whether you do that one-on-one at the beginning, in the middle, or right at the end, that's entirely up to you. And this is valued at 715 Rand. So Dom's going to put all of the information in the chat for how you can access the course. If you click on that link, it will give you a little bit more information, and you know where to find us as well on our social media. Wild Dreams Hospitality, Wild Dreams Coaching. So if you do think of any questions, you want to learn more about the course, then you can ask there. And we've also got a PDF that's been thrown into the chat too, if you want to download that, which will actually go into a bit more detail about the lessons that you will learn in that course. So sorry, we did go a little bit over time, 10 minutes, not too bad. But thank you everyone for being here. And yeah, just well done on taking this first step in your career. And if you are currently looking for a job, then we wish you the very best of luck. I would love if you just, as you're heading out of the room, if you want to just pop a message in the group, if you've got any feedback for us. We do these free masterclasses, webinars often. So yeah, if you enjoyed it, if you would like anything in a different format, if there's a particular topic that you are interested in that you want us to cover in the future, you're welcome to drop it into the chat, and we will be logging off in just a couple of minutes. So thank you, everyone. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of your evening.